Howdy folks, I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and normally on Saturdays I talk about an episode of a superhero animated series, but today I'm talking about the direct-to-video animated film Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. This movie is directed by Kurt Gita, story by Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, and Glenn Murakami, and stars Will Friedle, Kevin Conroy, and Mark Hamill. As is to be expected when I do a review of a film like this, there will be lots and lots of spoilers, so you've got two choices ahead of you. Go watch, or rewatch as the case may be, the movie so that you're not surprised by anything I say in terms of plot anyway, or you can skip the watch or rewatch and allow me to quickly sum up the movie and then get into the meat of the review where there will be plenty of spoilers as well. The choice is yours, but choose quickly cause here comes a plot synopsis. A gang of jokers are stealing high-tech stuff and Batman stops them. Turns out they're taking orders from someone who appears to be the original Joker, still as young as ever. Since they failed to steal the tech thing earlier in the movie, they ambush a Wayne Enterprises gala where faux Joker makes his grand entrance, pushing our protagonist fully into the story. Bruce and later Commissioner Barbara Gordon are adamant that this cannot possibly be the real Joker, despite what hard evidence tells them. Terry obviously wants in on this, but Bruce tries to force him to stop being Batman. Some hurtful words are exchanged, and Terry quits in anger. But the Joker gang attacks Terry in his civilian life, getting Dana in the hospital, while faux Joker attacks Bruce in his home. While Bruce recovers, Barbara tells Terry what happened the night the Joker died. Flashback to some point after the last episode of The New Adventures of Batman and Robin, where Robin is kidnapped by Harley Quinn, and she and Joker mutilate Tim so that he resembles Joker in body and mind. A big fight ensues, and when given the choice to kill Batman, Tim chooses to kill Joker instead. Bruce fired Tim after this, causing a big rift between the former partners. After hearing this, Terry figures that Tim still has to be involved with faux Joker in some way, but then changes his mind and decides it must be Jordan Price, the young executive who hates Bruce Wayne and wants to run his company. But when faux Joker almost kills Price, Terry is back to square one. But then he realizes, no wait, Tim is involved with faux Joker. Turns out he's only kinda right. Tim actually is faux Joker. We find out during his time in captivity, Joker not only brainwashed him and mutilated him to look like himself, but he also implanted a cybernetic mechanism that would eventually allow the Joker's personality to overwrite Tim's. And all that tech stuff you probably forgot about that faux Joker's minions were stealing, it is to build a thingy that takes over giant laser satellites in the sky. Before Joker can carve a literal big smiley face on Gotham, Terry finds a way to defeat him while saving Tim Drake's life. Bruce and Tim reunite, cue credits. So on the one hand, this movie kinda irritates me. Not in a big, huge way that keeps me from enjoying the film, because I really did enjoy this film and still do every time I watch it. But when you listen to the extra features on the DVDs for the Batman Beyond series, you keep hearing people involved with this series say that they didn't want to do a futuristic version of Bruce's Rogues Gallery. They wanted to give Terry his own Rogues Gallery. So even though they did bring in Mr. Freeze and Ra's al Ghul, the series was more or less able to find its own identity by giving Terry completely new characters to fight and interact with. But then you listen to the commentary on this movie, and where is all of that talk about not doing futuristic versions of Bruce's Rogues Gallery? On this commentary, the folks who made this movie kinda act like this story was a given and they couldn't do any other kind of story. And sure, a full-length movie with Spellbinder or Ink would have been a little weird, but maybe you could do some other kind of story without futurizing old Batman's bad guys or using one of the villains from the Batman Beyond series. Create some brand new villain who does feel like a big deal, and then you don't fall into the thing you always talked about not wanting to fall into on the series. But then I watch this movie and I don't care about any of that because the story is really great. Now, you might be one of those people who thinks that this story falls too much into the world of the old DC animated universe and isn't enough of a Batman Beyond film. Sort of like my friend who watched the Angel TV series but didn't watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So when he got around to season 5, I fully expected him to love it because I do, and I thought everyone did, and he didn't like it. Spike just sort of comes in out of nowhere and is too much of a focus in this season, he tells me. I had to think about it. Well, yeah, I guess he is. And if you don't watch Buffy, then you're really not going to like this new guy who comes in and sort of pushes more established characters out of the show. And that's sort of what we have here, isn't it? If you don't watch Batman the Animated Series, if you only watch Batman Beyond, then are you really going to care about this Tim Drake kid who got Jokerized and became a mad science terrorist in the future? I can't even answer that because every time I've ever watched this series and this movie, I've come at it from a perspective of being part of the DC Animated Universe. And yes, that includes Batman the Animated Series as well as Batman Beyond. I've never been that person who only watches Batman Beyond and gets angry that this movie spends so much time on a flashback set in the old DC Animated Universe, or that the entire plot of this movie hinges on non-Batman Beyond characters. That's never been how my mind works. I watch this movie, and I like it because it's a cool bridge between the old DC Animated Universe and the new. In a way, it does a better job of connecting those two worlds than the Batman Beyond episode Out of the Past. But it's all about perspective. If you watched and adored Batman the Animated Series and the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, then you probably thought it was awesome that, even if just for a few minutes, we got to return to that world and those characters. But if you want this to be a Batman Beyond movie, and and not a love letter to a show you never cared about or watched, well, you've got a valid point, even if it's one that I can't really speak to myself. But back to the Joker being the big baddie of this movie. Sure, Joker is the Batman villain. People who don't even read comics or watch Batman cartoons and don't care about the Batman movies still know that Joker is the arch nemesis of superhero fiction. Terry sums it up perfectly when he says he was the biggest, wasn't he? But beyond that, I won't do that again, I promise. In using the Joker, this movie is able to tackle some themes that would be impossible to dissect and explore with any other villain, whether resurrected from Bruce's old crew or a brand new one cooked up for this film. This movie is about legacy. Okay, stop laughing. Yes, any story about a youngster following in the footsteps of a grizzled veteran and taking up their mantle and doing what they did in their youth is going to be about legacy. But that's just the obvious kind of legacy. Quite often with superhero stories, you see older characters get replaced by someone else who is younger, sexier, and fresher, and most of the time it's because the sales are dropping, or the audiences are starting to lose interest, or maybe the creators are starting to lose interest, and so they shake things up by inserting a new character into the costume of the old guy. And then that becomes an air quotes legacy character. But most of the time, you don't see the idea of legacy really being tackled in, say, a Connor Hawke Green Arrow story or a Ted Kord Blue Beetle story. Most of the time, they either inherit their predecessors' villains and nothing really changes other than a new person fighting the old villains, or they get some new villains of their own, but things still aren't very different from how they were before the new hero came on the scene, just a few new faces. But this movie goes way deeper than that. In this movie, and in the Batman Beyond television series, you've got Terry following in Bruce's footsteps, but he isn't the first one to do that. You've also got Nightwing and Robin. Nightwing, for the purposes of this video, isn't important, but Robin, he was the son who, if things had gone a little smoother, might have become the next Batman. I used to think if I went on long enough, someday he'd retire and I'd, the heck with it. Capes, costumes, bad guys, it was kid stuff. But this is where the legacy stuff gets interesting. Joker and Harley, we're talking about in the flashback stuff now, their big evil scheme that sort of sets off the events of this movie is simultaneously simple and very human, while also very sick and twisted. Joker talks about how he and Batman have been doing this for so long, with none of it really going anywhere, and I have to say, there's shades of this conversation we keep hearing in the Killing Joke comic book story, and it's pretty cool having this movie call back to that, even if in a very subtle way. But Joker, real Joker, his whole motivation for doing what he does in this movie boils down to, I'm getting older, I want a son to carry on the family name. Sure, if Joker died right then and there, he'd be immortalized in the same way that Gilgamesh was, in the form of 40-year-old wanted posters. If you don't remember the police hanging up wanted posters in the saga of Gilgamesh, then you read that story wrong. But it's not the same. It seems like most human beings are a slave to their biological clocks, and Joker isn't any different, except that he is. His method of ensuring that his legacy lives on is also a big punch in the gut to Batman. 2 punches, in fact. One, he deals a fatal blow to Batman's legacy in the obvious way. He physically destroys Batman's surrogate progeny so that he can have some progeny of his own. But it goes past that. Even when Joker lies rotting beneath the cellars of Arkham, which begs the question, how did Joker's body end up way out here in a cave far away from Arkham in the episode Joyride? In any case, long after his death, Joker's actions drove a huge wedge between Bruce and Tim, which, if you take it to its logical extreme, is why Gotham didn't have a protector when Bruce finally gave up crime fighting. Yeah, I think I'm comfortable in saying that Joker's actions in the past are partially responsible for Gotham being such a Hades hole in the present day of Batman Beyond. And if Tim hadn't broken his programming, then Batman would not only have lost a son, but he'd effectively have a second Joker running around in the prime of his life, ready to pull the dangerous stunts his predecessor caused, but this time, Bruce would not be in the prime of his life and fully able to stop this new Joker. No matter what happened, Joker had his bases covered. While his primary goal might seem like wanting an heir, it seems like this entire movie revolves around breaking Batman until he cannot put himself back together. Heck, this may be the first time we ever see Batman ready to kill someone in this world. See that? He threw that knife straight at Joker's head. Even if he didn't actually deal a killing blow, he wanted to. And then right before Tim kills Joker, Batman's "I will break you in two" doesn't really feel like it's just talk. And while I'm not one of those guys who thinks Batman should just do away with his no-killing code, this does seem like one of the only times where him breaking it would be understandable. I mean, there's no words to describe the cruelty here. This is, hands down, much worse than Joker killing Jason Todd in the comics. Sure, that might have been more savage and difficult to watch, but when you're dead, it's over, and you're not in agony anymore. While Joker probably didn't want Tim to break his programming, it goes to show just how thorough of a monster he is that 40 years later, his havoc is still making waves and causing problems. So yeah, legacy. Not only is this a movie about that in the sense that Terry is dealing with stuff that was going on way before he was born, and that's par for the course when you insert yourself into the life of someone larger than all of this, but it's also a battle of legacy. It's all about the legacy in the past when Joker takes away Bruce's legacy to create his own, and it's all about that legacy returning to do more damage in the future, and now, once again, it's a battle of those legacies. Terry as Bruce's new legacy versus Joker's new legacy, while in the past, that same battle was being wedged internally inside young Tim Drake's mind. So anyone who thinks that the plot of this movie revolves a little too much much around plot elements from the New Adventures of Batman and Robin, while it is true that the plot here springs directly from that series and those characters, it's done in a way where Terry is integral in that plot through these themes. Any other film might not have handled these themes so well, and in my opinion, so subtly, and if a lesser film hadn't handled those themes so well, I might be more inclined to agree that this world and the premise of Batman Beyond doesn't play enough in the role of this movie. But Comics Kid 2099, one of the reasons you didn't like Mask of the Phantasm was that it doesn't play fair with the mystery angle. It tries way too hard to make you think that Carl Beaumont is the Phantasm, just to throw you off the trail of the real Phantasm. And that's true, that movie lost big points for me for the way it handled the whole mystery thing, and you might have brought this up because you thought that this movie committed a similar atrocity, like how Jordan Price, the young executive gunning for Bruce's job, looks and sounds an awful lot like the Joker. He is voiced by Mark Hamill after all, and if you take some of the letters from Jordan Price, you get a word that sort of looks like the word Joker. But this is different. For one, Hamill's turn as Price is much more subtle than anything he's ever done in the DC animated universe. When I hear Price, I'm not immediately thinking that it's Hamill, and so this character must be the Joker's clone or something like that. Now, if you're a lot better at catching the voices in an animated piece than I am, maybe you did recognize Hamill's voice and you instantly thought that this was Joker Jr. I can only say that this isn't the experience that I had here. Even this time, when I knew Hamill voiced Price, I didn't think this character sounded too much like the Joker to be a red herring trying to throw people off the real trail. And even the small role Price does play in the film of giving faux Joker's henchmen the access codes to steal the high-tech thingy from Wayne Enterprises feeds straight into the main plot of the movie. You might could say that this character is a red herring meant to distract you from the real threat of the story, but that's the worst thing you could say. Well, that, and it's weird that this movie comes up with another evil executive working at Wayne Enterprises, and Bruce is working to take back his company is a thing in this movie for all of 2 minutes, even though that was the big thematic crux of Season 1 of this series when this movie was released amidst Season 3. But that's a very small nitpick. But small nitpicks are about all I have with this movie as far as complaints are concerned. Yeah, it's weird that Terry gives a pretty good argument for why he continues to be Batman and why he shouldn't give it up now, but as soon as Bruce calls him a stupid kid, Terry throws it all away and storms away from his life that he's put together like a temperamental child. And yeah, that only happens so that the two-pronged attack can happen as the plot wants it to, and we've seen before that Terry is more stubborn than this and would not have given it up so easily. That might be the biggest issue I have with this movie, as it is inconsistent with Terry's established character. But like I said, there is no real way to have the rest of the plot happen without this happening. And then there's the very unusual bit about how Joker's last hoorah pushed Bruce into deciding that he would never endanger another young partner again. Yes, Terry points out that it was his decision, not Bruce's. But I think if we had known what we know from this movie now when this series first began, it would have seemed weird that Bruce eventually let Terry keep being Batman at all. If this was part of Bruce's backstory when this series first began, then after Terry got his revenge, Bruce would have sealed up the cave permanently and never looked back. And yeah, this is probably a nod to The Dark Knight Returns, but it didn't make much sense there either, even if that is one of the best Batman stories of all time. And yeah, it's weird that this movie tries to come up with an origin story for why Bruce uses a cane, even though we saw him fighting crime just fine right before he retired 20 years before the events of Batman Beyond. I always just assumed that he used a cane because he's in his 80s and old people often use canes. But like I said, those are just small nitpicks and don't take me out of this movie enough for me to, holy wow, is that the same Joker card from the cave? Are you telling me that after one of the most tragic and traumatic moments of his life, Bruce took that card and hung it in his cave? Cause we never see it in the New Adventures of Batman, unless Joker has more than one of those cards and Batman took one as a trophy like a month or two before Tim was kidnapped. So those are my thoughts on this movie. Sure, it has some inconsistencies with the Batman Beyond series, or some small plot issues that paint characters in a weird light, but those things don't bother me when weighed against the nuances of this film. I always loved and enjoyed this movie more than all of the other DC Animated Universe movies, but until this viewing, I never saw how powerful the symbolism was here, which is what really takes this from being a fun action movie that you could potentially pick at to a really thoughtful movie with something to say that also has fun action in it. I don't usually give movies ratings, but if I did rate this one, it would be pretty high. But that's just my opinion. What did you guys think of the movie and of my review? If you like this review, I also review episodes of superhero animated shows every week, and next week I'll be tackling an episode of Batman the Animated Series, and the week after that I'll be returning to the Batman Beyond series, and I also do other videos throughout the week, so you should check those out if that's what you're into. And if you did like this video, I encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and do anything else that you might want to do with the YouTube video. In the meantime, I'll see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day.